The court says that this trial could last around 6 to 8 weeks, with hearings scheduled every weekday except Wednesday, meaning that an outcome is likely before US election day in November. Amid the several criminal and civil trials Mr. Trump is facing, he continues to campaign for another term in office as part of that presidential race. Of course, he's hoping to beat the President Joe Biden and get back into the White House. So what impact could this trial have as Mr. Trump sets his sights on another term in office? Well, to discuss this in a little bit more detail, I'm joined by Robert Moran, a public opinion expert and a former political strategist and partner at the Brunswick Group, which is a management consulting firm, and also by Laura Fink, a Democratic strategist. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with you, Robert. You're a former strategist, but also you work in comms and PR. Is this going to hurt or help Mr. Trump's road to the White House?
So I think that's a great question. And my view is that it's sort of has a tertiary impact at best, because, and I think you heard it from the interviews from citizens today, is that his supporters believe that he's the victim of political persecution. His non-supporters, Biden voters, view him as already guilty. There's a very small middle range, and those folks are really going to be focused on the economy, on inflation, on a lot of sort of kitchen table issues. So I'm not sure that this court case, as interesting as it is going to have much of an impact on the general election.
Laura, do you agree or disagree with what Robert has just said? As someone who's been a Democratic strategist, do you think that this court case is a gift for Joe Biden?
I don't know that it's a gift, but it will have impact. Of course, there are a lot of things that could have impact on the election. The reason this could have impact is because a third of independents say that a guilty verdict coming down in this case will sway their vote, is likely to sway their vote. That's a good chunk of voters in what will be a very close election. There are, of course, a number of countervailing forces, but that number on independents should give the Trump team pause and the Biden team, something that they could look to. Of course, in any campaign, you have three things: the player, you have the game plan, and you have the weather. This is an example of the weather, the outside events that are impacting what happens on the campaign trail.
And I'll stay with you, Laura. I mean, I remember covering the 2016 election when I was based in the US, and the amount of airtime that Mr. Trump got in that campaign surpassed a lot of the other candidates. And certainly when you saw him at rallies, and one of my colleagues was saying that in a way, all these court cases have become the equivalent of the rallies that we saw in 2016 in terms of galvanizing his base.
Galvanizing his base and possibly having a deleterious effect on the voters he's looking to persuade. This, of course, mandates that he be in the courtroom for these trials, and it takes him off of the campaign trail. Now, he is known to make hay out of any press opportunity, but this is not necessarily one that is going to win voters over to his side. And so I would say losing that control over where he is and what he does while on the campaign trail is a disadvantage for Trump.
And what about you, Robert? What do you make of that? I mean, what do you think some of the seniors in the Republican Party are strategizing around this?
Sure. So I agree with the other guests that the negative, in my opinion, is largely that it keeps him off the campaign trail a number of days. And I do see that as a negative. So I think that's a very good point. I disagree that this is going to have much of an impact, because I think that voters already know that Trump is not a paragon of virtue. And they've known that for a very long time. So I'm not sure this is going to change opinions on that. I do go back to the economy, because traditionally in American politics, where the economy is going has been decisive for the reelection of presidents. And right now in America, you have 26%, according to Brookings Institution polling, saying that the economy is excellent or good, and 73% saying it's either fair or poor. And I think that that's where people are going to be focused. They're focused on sort of, what can you do for me now and in the future, as opposed to some of this stuff. And there's a lot of concerns right now about inflation. So just really quick, the issue that the president has is, on one hand, we have really good data from economic data from the government. On the other hand, we have very bad perception data among Americans. And so there's this huge disconnect. And so the Biden campaign is going to be spending a lot of time on trying to speak to the American people, encourage them, and try to communicate to them that the economy is improving. And there have been small shifts in perceptions of the economy. The question is, can they get enough of a shift like, say, Clinton in '96 to get reelected? And I think that's going to be the big issue, and not the trials.
So, Laura, let me bring you in on what Robert has just said there. These trials, if I'm summarising Robert correctly, are a bit of a sideshow and a distraction, and actually it's the economy, stupid.
Well, it's the economy stupid in the last couple of election cycles has proven to not necessarily cover what actually happens. It's an outworn phrase because we see issues that are central to Americans' lives, like the issue of reproductive choice and like the issues around the criminal trials that we haven't seen before. So while the economy will certainly be central, these issues that are outside of it are compelling. And in narrow elections, those issues matter. This particular case with the criminal cases proceeding forward also color the air and have a corrosive effect on memories of what it was like when we were under the Trump administration. So the question becomes, do voters remember that fondly, or do they remember the chaos? And that really depends on how these cases proceed and how Trump behaves. He's the player in all of this. And if he resorts to how he has usually behaved, that once again is a net negative for him as the campaign wears on.
OK, Robert, Laura, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on that trial.